So this video is basically just going to be confirming what literally everyone else has said over the years, which is that Doom is really fun. In a world with a million different shooters to play, it's hard for any one to stand out. But the original Doom, released in 1993, not only stands out, but will continue to stand out until the end of time. Because in order to birth a huge amount of games that take after it, Doom had to get an enormous amount of things right in the first place. When you first start Doom, you're thrown straight into the game. No 30-minute tutorials, no long cinematic story introduction. Doom just kicks you into the game, puts a gun in your hand and enemies in your way, and expects you to just start shooting. Doom is a simple concept. You're a space marine like in all the action movies, but instead of fending off hordes of aliens, you're fending off hordes of demons from hell. And damn is killing demons fun, and Doom gives you plenty of ways to kill them. I have sort of a thing for shotguns in games. I really love it when they're done well, and it's basically perfect in Doom. It's got a beefy blast sound, and the view of my enemies' heads exploding at the other end is really satisfying. What's more great is that the shotgun is pretty much there throughout the entire game, and is your best friend for nearly every enemy type. You also start with a really crummy pistol, which I never like to use, especially after picking up a chain gun which uses the same ammunition. All the other guns in the game are similarly as satisfying as a shotgun though, especially the plasma gun and the BFG 9000, which are extremely powerful. They allow you to wreak havoc once you find ammo for them. You can also punch demons with your fists, rip them apart with the chainsaw, and blow them to bits with the rocket launcher. More so than the weapons, I think Doom succeeds at having intense and satisfying gameplay. I think this is because staying in one place can get you killed pretty easily, so you have to quickly zoom around the map trying to dodge enemies' projectiles while also shooting back at the same time. And movement feels really nice too. You can develop a lot of tactics and strategies with all the speed and momentum you can generate. It all requires a bit of skill as well, which is satisfying in itself as you get better and better at the game. For example, the first time playing, you might be moving around at the slowest speed and being super careful, looking around corners and planning your next move. You'll quickly realize this was the wrong way to go about things, as a demon would show up and rip you apart as you were busy moving like a snail. So then you just decide to go balls to the wall and run all over the map, aiming and shooting at everything that moves, dodging projectiles, platforming around obstacles, and solving puzzles. I say puzzles due to the lack of a better word. They aren't really that hard to figure out, and they're not meant to be either. They're just a small set of objectives in the way to completing a mission, like getting a colored key to open a colored door. The real puzzle is completing them while at the same time you're running and gunning trying to kill or be killed. So basically it's just adding an extra layer of tasks to test the player's skills with. A skill puzzle, if you will, which also ramps up the intensity to a degree. What's really interesting is that it seems a lot of shooters after Doom do the exact same thing, where you have to get a certain item to progress through a barrier. Though what I think the other games fail to realize is that those things aren't actually fun on their own. They're only fun when added on top of the fact that you also have to deal with the enemies and traversal of the environment at the same time. A lot of other shooters have it where the enemies and puzzles are separated, while in Doom they're all in the same space and you have to deal with them both simultaneously, which I think is a more fun approach. Gameplay in Doom always feels like you're juggling several skills at once, which is why I think it feels so satisfying the more you master it. This is where a lot of the fun in Doom comes from. Every second of gameplay is challenging and exciting, partly due to the level design and how all the mechanics are incorporated in it. I think a lot of modern shooters fall into a trap of boring gameplay by having the player just sit still and shoot at static enemies that pose no threat. Meanwhile, it's clear that the best and most fun shooters have enemies that are actually competent and pose a threat to the player. Because with challenge, you're forced to actually think and develop your own tactics to win, which is really rewarding. That combined with good level design that allows room for both the player and the enemies to engage in a beautiful dance of combat is the recipe for making a great shooter game. So that's basically what all the levels consist of, blasting away through enemies and obstacles until the end. There are a few different enemy types that each have their own behavior, and they all seem to occupy a necessary space in combat. I never felt like any of them were out of place, and each of them add their own set of challenges to a level that you would have to account for, again juggling several skills at once. Occasionally there's a boss fight, but I didn't particularly care for them as they're essentially just big enemies with giant health bars, and you've usually saved up enough missiles or plasma to take them out without much hassle anyway. I think I prefer the level design in the first half of the game rather than the latter half. I'm not sure why, but I think I could endlessly play the first Doom levels forever. The way the levels are laid out is both extremely fun to play in and also to learn and perfect. The later levels, while not quite as good in my opinion, are still great though. And the way the environment changes to reflect how you're going deeper and deeper into hell is awesome. I'm also pretty impressed by some of the sections which had a dark and spooky horror atmosphere. They were basically just as fun as the rest of the game, but in a different way, where the method of running and gunning was even harder to pull off as visibility was limited. Getting the night vision power up reveals how much of the darkness changes up the gameplay, because when it's all lit up you just take out the enemies like you would normally without much second thought. I love this type of horror atmosphere in games, and while it's pretty simple and not utilized much in Doom, it's amazing that they made it as good as it is. At the end of every mission in Doom, you're presented with an intermission screen, which acts as a scoreboard that lists your completion percentage and the time you took to complete the level, which can be compared to the listed par time. I think this was a great addition because it encourages the player to replay certain missions and try to perfect them. You know the first time you complete a Doom mission and you see that you only found 10% of the secrets, that you gotta go back and play the mission again. And it can be really satisfying to set up challenges for yourself and beating them, like getting a shorter time than the par time. The whole game is highly replayable and can be a great challenge for players, especially when combined with the various difficulty options. And it's especially noticeable because the game isn't actually that long. I'd say it would take a first time player around 4 hours to beat and an experienced player maybe 2 hours to beat, and that's if they're taking their time. Because you don't actually need to complete everything in the mission in order to progress. All you have to do is reach the end to move on to the next level, which means people can speedrun each episode in the game in a matter of minutes. In fact, I thought I'd bring on my friend Spooky, who has more experience with the game in that regard, so he can talk more about it from his perspective. So Spooky, describe your experience with Doom and how you've played it over the years.
Hey Alan, thanks for having me. My experience with Doom is a bit different than most people, as I never had a home PC until I was 13 in the year 2000. I did first discover it on a Windows 95 machine in the school computer lab, but my first real experience was on the SNES port of the game. This console-focused Doom experience continued through Doom 64 and Final Doom on the PS1. Over the years, it has become one of my favorite games and game series, and I will often just have the urge to jump back in and raid hot lead over the Vassals of Hell. It has always been a part of my life, and I feel like it was a gateway drug for myself and others into a more skill-intensive, punishing, and rewarding style of game.
So what about Doom appealed to you, and why do you think the game is so fun to you and many others?
If this were 8-year-old me talking, I'd have to say the ultra-violence and dark iconography were the most striking and alluring aspect of the game, but looking back, it all boils down to momentum. At the time of its release, I was already entrenched in platformers and side-scrollers where the speed felt limited and the perspective didn't lend itself to truly feeling fast. I'm a speedrunner nowadays, and I can trace back that fascination with speed in gaming to Doom. The pace of the game is fast as is, but the unique quality of Doomguy's momentum, always moving at the same velocity, creates a feeling of wanting to blaze through the short episodic levels in quicker and quicker times. The game trains your brain to remember the linear corridors and enemy placement to better attack them on subsequent runs. The addictive bite-sized chunks of gameplay makes for rapid improvement on each short section and leads to an incredibly satisfying feeling of progression. It's why I speedrun Monster Hunter nowadays. The hunts are quite similar to the short bits of highly tenuous, highly rewarding action that comprise the Doom gameplay loop.
So would you say that Doom still holds up today?
In an era of games that are becoming bogged down by thicker and denser stories and cinematics, I feel that Doom is appreciated in a way it never could be at the time of its release. I remember when the 2016 reboot released, reading comments from many people talking about how refreshing it was to have Doomguy just interrupt the story beats and get back to the frenetic, heavy metal action sooner. In the current gaming sphere, we need games like Doom, because they allow you to have an immediate, visceral rush and provide you with true gameplay, unburdened by all the tropes of modern storytelling. It is game in its purest form. I still love to speedrun this game to this day, and not always in its original form. The modding scene has made the game endlessly replayable, and especially ones like Brutal Doom, with the glory kills and unlocked mouse aiming, provide a more modern and more difficult veneer to the timeless classic.
Well, Spooky, thanks a lot for your insight. I definitely agree that modding is a huge staple in PC gaming, and they released the source code for Doom pretty early on, so there's been years, well actually decades now, of different source ports and mods ranging from simple fan missions to complete game-changing overhauls, which means there's a way for everyone to experience the game in basically whatever form they want now, whether they want a more classic experience or perhaps add in a few additional features like vertical mouse movement or disabling auto aim. And of course, this is just one more reason why Doom is still being played to this day. Not even to mention all the games like Heretic and Hexen, which run and play extremely similarly to Doom. All the aspects of Doom's core gameplay make it a very desirable game to play and also to emulate. I should also note Doom's great soundtrack. Much of it is inspired by or closely mirrors rock and metal songs of that era, and it serves greatly in pumping up the suspense or intensity of the action. The music is so good, people regularly joke about how every Doom album comes with a free game along with it. Overall, I'd agree that Doom is one of those games that had a massive impact on gaming in general. spawning countless iterations, inspirations, and clones that would continue to try and emulate Doom's gameplay to this day. The violence, speed, and momentum of the gameplay makes it near endlessly enjoyable, and the copious amounts of love Doom has towards it is only evidence of that. Doom seems to touch on something inside us which is immensely satisfying. Anyway, that's it for this video. Big thanks to Spooky for helping out on this one. See you guys next time. Peace.